Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Now.
A Peloton? Give it up for our first time ride.
Right, first ride. I'm a little nervous, but excited. Let's do this. 5 days in a row. You surprised? I am. 6 a.m. Yay.
Rising with the sun.
That was totally worth it.
Let's go race Boston 50 ride.
Hey, a year ago, I didn't realize how much this would change me. Thank you.
This holiday, give the gift of Peloton.
Nothing says maybe you should lose a few pounds like gifting your already rail-thin life partner a Peloton. She would rather be anywhere else in the world than here than in her glacial home with the husband that she loathes. That Peloton commercial would be better if at the end you found out that she used it to train hard every day so that the following year she could beat the blank out of her husband for buying her an exercise bike for Christmas. These comments only scratch the surface of the negative feedback to this Peloton commercial released in November of 2019. The commercial, though somewhat exaggerated and dramatic, was completely harmless. Nonetheless, it was slandered and opposed everywhere in the media with articles and comments calling it creepy, dystopian, and sexist, leading to a 9% stock market drop for Peloton. But most of the hate seemed to be directed towards the husband in the commercial, who only had 5 seconds of screen time. The husband was played by actor and elementary school teacher Sean Hunter, who was perplexed not only by the negative feedback the commercial was receiving, but by how many people had personally told him he had become a symbol of the patriarchy. In an interview he gave, Hunter stated, "As I continue to reflect on the commercial, I consider these thoughts. Why are people creating so many additional narratives to the story? Am I allowed to view the commercial positively after receiving such negative feedback?" The reason the commercial received such negative feedback was because that many people thought that the husband was trying to force his wife to lose weight to fit his rigid standards. Many even felt like the wife looked terrified, attempting to read into her nonverbals, entirely forgetting that the characters are fictional. The actress who played the wife, Monica Ruiz, has even come out and stated, "Honestly, I think it was just my face. It was my fault. My eyebrows look worried." The media was wrongly throwing out accusations, spinning this harmless 30-second commercial into a divisive narrative about an abusive husband, despite his minuscule 5 seconds of screen time. Unfortunately, this is not the only way that the media attacks, ridicules, and accuses men. These assumptions, accusations, and stereotypes about and against men are extremely common in media. Good evening. My name is Ciarlariello, and tonight I'm going to be discussing the media's unjust portrayal of men. I would like to introduce to you my panelist, Mr. Peter Schweitzer, investigative journalist, novelist, author, and political consultant whose experience with the media is extensive. In January of 2019, the razor company Gillette released an ad that began with men exhibiting stereotypical adverse male behavior, such as bullying, sexually harassing women, and tolerating those who did. Portrayed as patriarchal, rude, and vulgar, the men excused this awful behavior with careless, "boys will be boys." The commercial takes a turn, however, with other men stepping in to prevent these things from happening. A man holds another man back when following an attractive woman he sees in the streets. A father at a barbecue pulls apart 2 wrestling boys, telling them that's not the way to treat each other. A man sees a boy being chased in the street by bullies and steps in to intervene. The commercial closes with a voiceover that states, "Because the boys watching today will be the men of tomorrow." Gillette should be commended on their efforts to call men to be good friends, husbands, and fathers, and to call out this harmful behavior. However, the more subtle message seems to be that the good men are few and far between, while the men with more unruly, and some might say toxic, behavior are the majority. This ad received considerable backlash. As of September 2019, the video of the ad, posted on Gillette's official YouTube channel, had 800,000 likes and over 1.5 million dislikes, along with hundreds of thousands of comments bashing Gillette for releasing this controversial ad. Twitter user @OnePowers5 tweeted, "This ad is offensive and insulting," and called out Gillette for implying that this is what men do: fight, barbecue, and harass women. The ad also garnered praise from many people, such as actress Jessica Chastain, who tweeted, "Thank you for this reminder of the beauty of men." Curious to see the people's response to the ad, the survey company YouGov took a poll of over 27,000 people, asking them if they thought it was acceptable to charge all men to be better. Surprisingly, the results showed that men's and women's opinions on this matter were almost equal, adding up to an overall result of which around 60% thought it was wrong and only 30% thought it was right. A young boy watching this Gillette ad might associate his father with the careless, rude, and vulgar men in the commercial. Gillette's position on this matter seems to stem from a belief that men's natural tendencies is towards this adverse behavior, such as the kind portrayed in their ad. This, however, is a dangerous belief to hold. The natural behaviors of men are not inherently evil, and on the contrary should be actively and responsibly exhibited by all men. Innocent, non-violent backyard wrestling between young boys is not evil unless the intent is for violence. Having the desire to honorably and respectfully love a woman and procreate is not evil unless that desire becomes perverted. In an article written for the Weekly Standard titled "The Crisis of Manliness," Dr. Waller Arnuo, professor of political science and philosophy at Carleton University, stated, "We should stop trying to re-engineer the human soul to prevent boys from being boyish." He goes on to say, "The point is to channel these energies into the development of character. Boys and young men still want to be heroes, and the way to educate them to treat girls and women with respect is to appeal to that heroism, not to try to blot it out." This stereotype of men as naturally aggressive and sexist is unacceptable because it stigmatizes men and makes men convenient scapegoats. Unfortunately, this is not the only way that the media attacks masculinity. Millions of people watch TV every day. Chances are, if you watch TV during the commercial break, you will see at least one ad portraying the man in the commercial, especially if he is a father, as dumb, naive, and all around helpless. This clueless father theme is everywhere in commercials. He is a middle-aged, slightly overweight Homer Simpson type who is unable to change his baby's diaper by himself, take care of his own children, or buy everything his wife asks him to at the grocery store, despite holding the list in his hand. This stereotype is so pervasive in the media that it is socially acceptable and almost expected to portray men, especially fathers, as incapable. This portrayal is simply seen as another staple of entertaining, humorous commercials. For example, in an ad for the Redmond Wonder Mom, a well-intentioned husband attempts to pressure wash his kitchen floor in order to clean it as thoroughly as possible. Of course, this does nothing except destroy a portion of the kitchen. His knowing, resourceful wife walks up and hands him a Wonder Mom as she gives him a frustrated yet forgiving look. In another commercial, a husband is given a Home Depot gift card by his wife and children and uses it to buy tools with which he accidentally destroys various parts of the house, even cutting a hole in the wall of the master bedroom. After their table collapses from one of them during breakfast, the daughter woefully states, "I knew we should have gotten him a puppy," as if the father was a toddler who could not handle the power tools he so fiercely desired. These ads are just a sample of the abundance of TV commercials and shows that portray men this way. Even children's books, like the Berenstain Bears, portray the father as another child who the mother must tolerate. I did not have to look far to find dozens of additional ads portraying men as incompetent and childish. Each of these brands shown on screen has made commercials depicting men this way, releasing them for the world to see, and begging the question of how this affects children's views of their fathers. A child watching these ads might associate his father with being capable, careless men in the commercial, causing them to lose respect for their fathers. These companies are willing to negatively influence the way a child views his father in order to sell more of their product. Moreover, backlash against these ads is less common than against ads that are racist or sexist against women, because men typically believe they do not have the right to complain, or because they feel their complaints will be ignored. Richard F. Doyle, the founder of the Men's Defense Society, an association which promotes men's rights and responsibilities, states, "Men's more legitimate gripes and philosophies are censored as if heresy." He goes on to say, "The very term men's rights reeks of political incorrectness. This enormous reservoir of sentiment makes judicial and social reform incredibly difficult." What began as a joke has led to one of the most common male stereotypes seen in the media today. And in a world where the opposition to stereotypes is growing, it seems only logical to eliminate this one as well. This portraying of men as naturally sexist and aggressive, or as emasculate and helpless, begs the question of whether or not these stereotypes against men are actually harmful. Many see them as offensive and unnecessary, yet to others they are seen as acceptable and even somewhat timely, considering that throughout history, men have been culturally dominant. Despite people's opinions, however, God's word offers authoritative answers. Jesus himself used the Jewish stereotypes against the Samaritans in his parables and teachings. Due to political and religious disagreement, the Jews and Samaritans had a long history of mutual contempt. The Jews often viewed the Samaritans as godless and unruly, even using the name Samaritan as an insult. Jesus, however, used these stereotypes to his advantage. For example, in John chapter 4, Jesus meets a Samaritan woman at Jacob's well and immediately begins talking to her about the promise of the Messiah. The woman goes from there and tells the entire town about Jesus, and they all become eager to hear his teachings. Likewise, in Luke chapter 17, Jesus heals a group of 10 lepers, instructing them to show themselves to the priests. However, only one turns back and gives thanks to Jesus, falling on his face before Jesus' feet. Finally, in Luke chapter 10, Jesus tells a parable of the Good Samaritan, the only one to show mercy upon the dying traveler. In all three of these instances, Jesus showed that the Jews' portrayals of the Samaritans as lost and lawless was not always correct. He proved that despite the stigma against them, these people were capable of furthering his kingdom just as much, if not more, than the Jews were. This same principle can be easily applied to the media's portrayal of men. Just because men are negatively portrayed does not mean they have any less place in God's kingdom or here on this earth. When God is explaining to Samuel why to choose David as king over Israel, he states, "For the Lord looks not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." Of course, this is not to suggest that men are perfect. No one should deny that there are men who are sexist, aggressive bullies, or lazy, uninvolved fathers. But it is equally as sexist and lazy to point the finger at all men, as society and the media so often do. Men as a whole should not be blamed for the poor choices and actions of a few who attempt to express and fulfill their masculinity through these harmful means. Naturally, this begs the question of what true manliness should look like. In an interview I conducted with Dr. Waller R. Newell, he stated, "In reality, manliness is a balance between gentle traits and bold traits aimed at just purposes. Aristotle's golden mean. To be a man means to become a gentleman. Men should not have to feel afraid to show emotion, generally perceived as a weaker masculine trait, nor should they fear being bold, competitive, and aggressive, though not excessively so. It is entirely possible to strike a balance between the softer, more emotional side of men and the strong testosterone-fueled side. One great example of a man who did this was King David. David wrote music and poetry, played the harp, and openly wept and danced before God. He also led Israel to countless victories in battle, killed lions and bears, and defeated the most feared soldier of his time, Goliath. He struck this fair balance between the emotional and heroic sides of men. This is where much of the media fails to understand true masculinity, portraying men as either self-servingly bold and aggressive, or as emotionally weak, fragile, and incapable. At its face value, these anti-masculine portrayals may simply be seen as jokes that have no real-world consequence. Unfortunately, this is not the case. According to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, in 2017, men accounted for almost 80% of all suicide deaths in the United States. And the suicide rate among men is rising extremely quickly. Naturally, this begs the question of why. In a 2014 interview concerning rising male suicide rates, Dr. Miles Groth, professor of psychology at Wagner University, stated, "This is a result of the image portrayed of them and of the roles they are compelled to play, but also given what they hear about themselves and especially as young boys come to believe about themselves." He goes on to say, "As a result of self-hate, the suicide rate of boys and men has increased at an alarming rate over the last 20 years. The message that men are constantly fed, that most of them are unwanted or harmful to society, is beginning to take its toll, leading to things like depression, loneliness, and suicide. Instead of constantly degrading men, the media should focus on the more beneficial aspects of masculinity. This is precisely why the Gillette commercial was so poorly received. Many men felt like Gillette was being didactic, spending the entire commercial belittling them, only to instruct them to be better. What the media needs is more portrayals of manliness that reaffirm the good qualities in men. In his second letter to the church in Ephesus, the Apostle Paul writes, "Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up and as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear." These uplifting and encouraging messages are sorely needed in our world today, a world where the spread of negativity and malice is pervasive. As you can see, our culture's perception of men is an immense problem that our country is facing. The way in which men are portrayed is unacceptable, being depicted as either one of two extremes, being overtly aggressive and sexist, or incapable, naive, and weak. Once again, this is not to suggest that men are flawless. Regrettably, some men do behave like this. But to shift the blame onto all men and then propagate these ideas throughout the media is unacceptable and wrong. This raises the question of what we can do to help solve this issue. One way is to donate to charities like NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, which takes steps to help not only men, but anyone who is suffering from feeling unwanted, lonely, and hopeless. The simplest way, however, may be to raise awareness about the stigma against men. Through the Gillette ad, it was uncovered that millions of people feel that society is not doing men justice. It is crucial that enough people speak out against this for change to be sparked. Men should not have to live their life under the shadow of society telling them how awful they are, but instead should hear messages of kindness, reaffirmation, and love, feeling unrestricted and unaffected by how society views them. It is just as President Theodore Roosevelt once stated, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or how the doer of deeds could have done it better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, who strives valiantly, who spends himself for a worthy cause." Thank you.
Well, Nick, that was wonderful. It was funny, it was powerful at the same time. We managed to fuse together in a single speech Home Depot, Jesus, King David, and Peloton. It's not an easy thing to do. I have two questions for you. First of all, I think you make a powerful case that ads like the Gillette ad and others have backfired and that people reject them. Yet they seem to keep making those ads. Do you have a theory as to why they're doing that when the data seems to indicate people don't like it?
I think it reflects like their personal mission statement. On Gillette's website, like it explains why they released the ad. They held true to the ad despite all the backlash, and I think it just reflects their personal values. Again, personal mission statement. They believe because their slogan is "the best man could be," and they were challenging men, asking if they really were the best the men could be in their ad, and I think it really just holds true to their personal values.
That's great. My second question is, how much do you think the ads reflect sort of the advertising industry, and how much do they reflect the broader view of some people in society? The Peloton ad is interesting to me because it's not like the Gillette ad. It's not designed to make men look bad, but you had a group of people who took offense at an innocent ad. Talk to me a little bit about the differences you think of the reactions, and how much of this is the broader society, how much of this is, say, the media itself trying to push this message?
Right, I think the analogy I've heard quite a few times is like a pendulum. So the pendulum in 1960 was that women were being made fun of and kind of portrayed this way in the media, and men were the strong, bold kind of Marlboro cigarette guy. But the pendulum has swung the other way, and now men are the kind of portrayed as not as big of a role. And I think that reflects that sort of shift, that paradigm shift that we've adopted as a culture, and the need for just more selling for the ad industry. I think just that the ad industry can take advantage of this shift that we've seen in paradigm, like shift in the paradigm in our culture. And if they can take advantage of it, then they can sell more of their product. And yeah.
That's excellent. Final question. You gave us a couple of wonderful biblical models as sort of modeling manhood, the tenderness and the strength at the same time with King David. Is there any modern example, a media example? You gave some of the negative portrayals. Is there any positive one, either in a movie or in advertising, that kind of struck you that has been powerful and is successful and that kind of goes against this trend?
Mm-hmm. So I don't watch much TV, but I did come across an ad that it was a Dove ad for the hygiene company Dove, and it basically kind of but portrayed men as good fathers, taking care of their children and being active in their lives and not going and cheating on their wives. And so I think Dove and a couple of other kind of companies I've seen do that really just try to uplift men in that way. So
Excellent. Great job. Thank you very much.